Among the many species that roamed the Alpha, Beta, Delta, and Gamma quadrants, perhaps the most powerful were the immortal non-corporeal Q of the Q continuum. From the perspective of humans and other similar species, they had godlike powers, able to manipulate energy, matter, time, and space. Many of their kind believed they were the highest and purest form of life. However, there were some limitations to their powers, as under specific circumstances they could be killed. Yet the death of a Q was a matter taken very seriously by the Continuum and could have lasting, galaxy-wide repercussions. Though some claim the Q always existed, others say they were once similar to humans until they evolved over eons. Whatever their origins, the New Era, as they called it, saw them reach a golden age, where they explored the universe, sharing thoughts and opinions about every subject imaginable. Yet while some continued to influence events wherever they deemed appropriate, as time went on, most became lazy and apathetic, choosing to simply maintain the status quo without any changes that might disturb their society. But some of their species rebelled against the system, growing fond of taking humanoid form and interacting with less advanced beings, like humans from the Alpha Quadrant. In 2267, by human calendar, an immature young being named Trelane interacted with the crew of the USS Enterprise under Captain Kirk, and while his species was never identified, his near-omnipotent powers and behavior made some believe he was a Q. In the 24th century, as the Federation explored further into deep space, a Q appeared to the crew of the USS Enterprise D, accusing their species of straying too far from their home system, calling them a dangerous, savage child race, unprepared to deal with the dangers awaiting them. Captain Jean-Luc Picard disagreed with this assessment and defended humanity, claiming they made rapid progress and were no longer the violent, greedy people of the past. Placing humanity on trial, Picard was tested with the mystery of Farpoint Station, where the people possessed a technology able to build objects of great complexity seemingly out of nowhere. When the station came under attack from a powerful being, Picard had an opportunity to resolve the issue with violence, but instead continued to investigate and learn the facility imprisoned a sentient being with incredible powers, forcing it to build whatever they wished. In response, the being's mate attacked. By ensuring the release of the creature, the violence stopped and the mystery of Farpoint Station was solved. After passing the test, Q allowed them to continue exploring the galaxy, but said the trial wasn't over and he'd be watching their progress. Q and the Continuum's interest in humanity grew from a preoccupation that their natural curiosity and ability to adapt might one day trigger their evolution into Q-like beings, not only making them potential rivals, but also granting future humans the power to cause great harm on an intergalactic scale. As pointed out by the Traveler, another highly advanced being of great power, it's only in the 24th century that humanity truly became interesting to more developed life forms. Therefore, the Continuum chose the second half of the 24th century as a testing ground to measure humanity's potential. Should they prove themselves unworthy of future evolution, they would be wiped out, and if they proved worthy, they would continue on to whatever fate awaited them. Choosing Captain Picard and the Enterprise crew as participants in the trial, Q started appearing before them, often at random and for silly reasons, seeming to put them in great harm for his own amusement. Yet often there was a larger game being played, as indeed, the trial never ended. Unlike many of the other Q, the being who visited the Enterprise seemed to enjoy interacting with less advanced species, often acting as an agent of change and chaos. The Continuum did not appreciate his antics, and increasingly viewed him as a rebel. When he next approached the Enterprise, Q expressed a desire to bring a human into the Continuum, to be studied and serve as a model for change. Therefore, he gifted their first officer the incredible powers of a Q, tempting him to permanently join the Continuum. However, Riker learned wielding great power without earning it would not bring him fulfillment or long-term happiness, and so he declined the offer, and Q agreed to leave. Fed up with the erratic behavior of this rebel Q, he was exiled from the Continuum for a time, and so returned to the USS Enterprise, where he attempted to join their crew. When Picard refused, Q transported their vessel 7,000 light-years toward the Delta Quadrant, where they met a cube-shaped ship traveling in the direction of Earth. The vessel belonged to the Borg, a relentless and merciless cybernetic species. The Enterprise only survived the encounter because Picard admitted to needing Q's help. Though on the surface, this seemed like another bout of mischief from Q, there may have been a larger plan at work, as the Borg eventually traveled through time, resulting in some of their drones crash landing in the Arctic ice of Earth centuries earlier. In 2153, several of these drones were discovered and accidentally activated by a group of scientists, allowing them to send a signal toward faraway Borg space. The message took about 200 years to arrive, but pointed the way towards Earth, meaning this was likely the catalyst for the Borg to send the original cube encountered by the Enterprise. The implication of these events meant Q likely introduced the Enterprise to the Borg, not for his own amusement, but as a dire warning, giving humanity time to prepare for a threat that was already approaching. Growing further irritated with the rebel Q, the Continuum stripped him of powers and made him mortal, and so he chose to take human form, and again tried to join the Enterprise crew, this time so they might protect him from his many enemies. Although his integration into the crew was difficult, he genuinely came to care for them in his own way, and even offered to sacrifice his life for their safety. When the other Q witnessed this selfless act, they restored his powers and welcomed him back into the Continuum. Having particularly enjoyed his time with Data, an android who longed to be human, Q allowed him to feel a full-throated belly laugh, thereby giving him a glimpse into one of humanity's most joyous emotions. In the coming years, Q interacted with the Federation crew on various occasions, and while his meddling was often negatively received, he helped Picard a number of times, even acting as a sort of spiritual guide to confront and understand the choices of his past. For a time, he took one of the captain's former love interests, Vash, on an adventure across the galaxy, promising Picard to keep her safe. However, she broke off their partnership in 2369. On another occasion, after two Q living on Earth were executed by the Continuum, their daughter grew older and developed powers, causing Q to show up and bring her into the Continuum. When Q later visited the Federation outpost of Deep Space Nine, he mockingly challenged Commander Benjamin Sisko to a fight. Yet to his surprise, Sisko did not have the same aversion to violence as Picard, and he punched Q in the face. 7 years after beginning the trial of humanity, Q once again appeared before Picard, arranging yet another test, this time involving a time travel mystery. With the help of his Q ally, Picard eventually solved the problem, and Q confessed the Continuum was testing humanity's ability to understand more advanced concepts about the nature of the universe. Although they passed the test, Q yet again proclaimed, "The trial never ends." Later, when the crew of the USS Voyager was stranded in the Delta Quadrant, they accidentally released a Q from prison, prompting the former rebel Q to appear and attempt recapturing the criminal. However, the incarcerated Q, called Quinn, then requested asylum on Voyager, explaining that his crime was a desire to end his own life, an action forbidden by the Continuum. When Captain Janeway agreed to judge a hearing, Quinn argued that the Q lived so long and experienced so much, the Continuum was now a place where nothing happened, where their people were so apathetic they no longer even spoke to each other. Quinn, who was once a great philosopher, saw that severe stagnation in their society was a problem, and was so inspired by the antics of the rebel Q, he chose to act by ending his own life. He then pointed out the irony that the renegade he admired was now just like all the others, trying to stop a free thinker from going against the system. Throughout the hearing, they learned Quinn was an important figure in galactic history who influenced a number of important historical events, including helping Isaac Newton make discoveries, saving the life of William Riker's ancestor, and starting a 100-year war between Romulans and Vulcans. It was argued that such an important being could not simply be allowed to end his life, as the repercussions might be drastic for the Continuum, which could then spill out into the rest of the universe. At one point, the rebel Q attempted to bribe Janeway, offering to take the stranded Voyager crew home to the Alpha Quadrant for a favorable ruling, but she declined. As it turned out, Voyager's presence in the Delta Quadrant went on to have massive repercussions, including a time travel event, where Voyager became involved with 29th century technology ending up on Earth in the past, leading to the technological revolution of the 20th century and the eventual formation of Starfleet and the Federation. Therefore, it's possible this was yet another test by Q, as Janeway accepting his bribe would have meant none of those events occurred, and the Federation may have never existed. In the end, Janeway judged in favor of Quinn and the rights of the individual, forcing Q to make him mortal. Janeway then tried to convince Quinn to find happiness living out his mortal life, but he killed himself soon after. Although Q argued against this result, he could not help but admire Quinn's conviction, inspiring a return to his rebellious ways, which started by helping Quinn procure the poison used to end his life. As predicted, when word of Quinn's death reached the Continuum, it caused great upheaval, as a faction following the rebel Q started a movement for change, while others wished to keep things the same. This sparked a vicious civil war that killed many of their people, and caused supernovas to erupt throughout the galaxy. Peace was eventually established thanks to the aid of the USS Voyager, resulting in the rebel Q agreeing to mate with a female Q to produce the first child ever born inside the Continuum. It was hoped that Q Jr. would lead their people toward a new future, but he grew up wild, arrogant, and selfish, causing Q to leave his son with the Voyager crew so they might teach him human values. Though it was a challenging experience, his behavior improved, and these changes, along with the importance of his father, convinced the Continuum to allow the boy back. As a reward for their help, Q offered Janeway new coordinates that would take several years off their long journey back to the Alpha Quadrant, and when she asked why he didn't take them all the way home, Q explained doing all the work for Voyager would set a bad example for his son. Yet once again, it seems likely Q had a larger plan in place. By creating a new route for Voyager, he set them on a direct path with a Borg transwarp hub, capable of transporting ships vast distances in mere moments. Although the original plan was to go around because it was too dangerous, a future Admiral Janeway traveled back in time and sacrificed her life to get Voyager home immediately, and in doing so destroyed the transwarp hub, landing a devastating blow against the Borg. Though the Q were extremely powerful, they too feared provoking this widespread cybernetic species, and so perhaps Q sent Voyager on a path that would not only get them home quickly, but also hurt the Borg. According to a possible alternative timeline, Q eventually returned to have several more interactions with Jean-Luc Picard up until 2401, when it was revealed the Q species was not really immortal. Q felt his powers draining and knew he didn't have much time left, so used his final moments to help his old friend Picard travel through time and come to terms with the death of his mother. Then with his final bit of strength, he said goodbye and returned Picard to 2401, even bringing back a friend who passed away as a final gift. The next year, despite losing his life, Q appeared before Picard's son, Jack Crusher, claiming he could be there because Q did not experience time in the same linear fashion as humans. He then made it clear that while Picard's trial was over, Jack's had just begun. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Tamika the Black Wolf, Tom Moonstruck Waters, Ambassador Alex Nunez, and Admiral Flint. If you'd like to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/CivilizationEx, where you can gain early access to videos, vote on future content, and watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.